According to an August 5th LA Times article called Allegations That Deputy Worked with Skinhead Royal Jail System by journalist Robert Facciarecci, the head of the LA County Jailhouse Intelligence, Lieutenant Greg Thompson, received a memo from two deputies who had learned that a certain jail deputy was working with skinhead gang involved in drug smuggling. Well, a source says that Thompson went to the suspected deputy, told him about the memo, and gave him the names of the informants. At least 5 jailers have been convicted or fired over similar drug trade allegations in recent years. Jail is part of a system that has been set up to deal with the eventuality of stepping outside the law. This system is meant to protect and reinforce freedoms that we all enjoy. However, the system is not perfect. Innocent people can and do go to jail. As a society, we should think about how any of us would like to be treated if we were to end up being arrested for some reason. I spent the night in jail. I'm not proud of it, but I am glad that nothing worse happened to me during my incarceration. Jail time should be administered uniformly according to rigorously enforced policies that are not subject to the varying whims of the guards that happen to be on duty at any given time. In correctional institutions, minimizing corruption and ensuring proper prison treatment is important for inmates, guards, and the public as a whole. In this presentation, I will first lay out the problems. These include violence, corruption, denial of rights, and lax enforcement. I will then discuss the causes of system breakdown, such as lack of oversight and greed. Lastly, I'll talk about solutions and what you can do. First, the problem. Prisoners are being denied their rights. According to the Texas Civil Rights Project, of the more than 200,000 people incarcerated in Texas today, most do not have access to attorneys. Because of limited resources, the TCRP represents less than 1% of the hundreds of prisoners who reach out to them every year. Denial of rights was the complaint of prisoners at the Attica Correctional Facility in New York, site of an infamous 1971 prison riot. Following the death of Attica Warden Vincent R. Mancusi on July 5, 2012, New York Times reporter Douglas Martin recalled that 43 people died as a result of the unrest, including 10 guards. The mostly white guards were accused of racist behavior. Rights are being denied, according to a December 2004 article in the International Journal on World Peace by Elizabeth Brownell Balestrieri, entitled Abu Ghraib Prison Abuse and the Rule of Law. She states, Jose Padilla was seized in 2003 in Chicago, that is, away from a zone of active combat, as he was suspected of planning a terrorist attack in league with Al-Qaeda, and he was then held without any access to legal counsel and without criminal charges. So you see, there are serious problems. What's causing them? Well, a culture of mistreatment has become ingrained in the correctional system. Some say it's part of the deterrent effect, that prisons should not be comfortable. In a 2005 paper for the California Law Review entitled Are Rights Efficient? Challenging the Managerial Critique of Individual Rights, David A. Super acknowledges the argument that enforceable rights would unduly burden administration. That's the argument. Well, Super contends that in reality they can improve operational efficiency. He argues, quote, an outside reviewer entirely independent from the entity being evaluated will provide the most reliable appraisal. Improper oversight is one cause. The 2009 edition of the Prisoner's Rights Handbook, published by the Pennsylvania Institutional Law Project, notes that the case of Tribble versus Gardner, which found that rectal searches stemmed not from valid security concerns, but rather from punitive and behavioral control motivations. Good old-fashioned greed is another culprit. Andrew Blankstein, journalist for the LA Times, reported on February 15, 2012, about a custody employee at the Men's Central Jail article was entitled, "Guard Arrested on Suspicion of Smuggling Cocaine into Jail." Presumably it was meant for sale to the inmates. If those are some of the causes, are there any workable solutions? Well, I'm going to talk about three types of solutions. One, legal settlements, which can lead to policy changes, enforceable individual rights, and also progressive leaders like Dennis Kucinich. According to the TexasCivilRightsProject.org, the TCRP reached a favorable settlement after a guard yelling racial epithets shocked an African-American prisoner with a cattle prod. Another settlement was reached for the family of an asthmatic prisoner who guards were mocking instead of calling for medical attention, and he died. In the Our Rights Efficient article I mentioned earlier, David A. Super analyzes the history of entitlement programs and writes, thus enforceable individual rights become a substitute for federalization of administration, a means of preserving state and local control over most phases of program design and operations. In other words, acknowledging the legal rights of prisoners is cheaper and more effective. You can take action by voting for political leaders like Dennis Kucinich and others who support prison rights. Kucinich has specifically mentioned the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. On the website ontheissues.org, they quote him as saying, "We cannot justify giving the Attorney General the ability to designate domestic terror groups." That's giving them too much power, and I agree. Now that I've gone through the problems, causes, and solutions, let me wrap up by reminding you why this is important. I'm also going to give you some web addresses, so get your pens ready. Ensuring prisoners their rights protects inmates, guards, and the tax-paying public. Furthermore, it's key to any successful rehabilitation, which is an important goal of the prison system. Corruption and lack of oversight continue to plague the system, but prisoners' rights groups are helping to correct abuses. In order to ensure fair treatment for all citizens at all times, it's important that we play by the book in every area, including the prison system. You can learn more and donate at one of these websites, TexasCivilRightsProject.org, CCRJustice.org, that's the Center for Constitutional Rights, ACLU.org, and Kucinich.house.gov. Remember, your voice matters.